Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams. We are now in part 6 and this is where we get a little bit deeper into adding some user data and using some Xpresso. Xpresso may seem a little bit complicated when you look at it at first, but believe me, it's actually not, and it's actually really essential to the process. So the next stage is to prepare the wings for its flapping setup and its control, as well as the wings being able to fold with an easy user interface for animation. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to expand the master controller and expand the body controller to expose the 4 wing controllers. Notice that these say ROT on the end, which indicates they're for rotation. This is where we have the vibrate tag on each of these. But there's something else that we're going to need to add to this, which is going to make it complete, which is pose morphs. The pose morphs are going to give us the ability to eventually use a slider in which is going to fold all the wings backwards, in addition to having the vibrate tag flap the wings separately or even at the same time. In order to do this, we need to make sure that the controllers are set up and each of ability are separated. And the best way to do that is to not apply it directly to the controllers that we've already got selected here. That meaning for both the pose morph and the vibrate tag simultaneously, because they can actually conflict with each other. For that reason, we're going to create a null for each of these that is going to represent a new controller, which will be our pose morph. To do this, we're going to select one of them at a time. We're going to hold down the shift key and then press on the null, and it's going to create a null inside there. We're going to drag this null out, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to coordinates and then freeze all. We're then going to drag and drop this into the null. We can now copy this naming, put it into the null, but instead of it saying ROT for rotation, it's going to say PM, short for pose morph. If you've done this correctly, you won't find that anything flips the wrong way or looks very odd. Now with the new null selected, we are going to right click, go to the rigging and then select pose morph. The type of pose morph we're going to be using is rotation, and within the tag we want to give it a name that's meaningful, such as left small fold. We can leave everything exactly the way it is, everything will be fine, and then we're going to select this as it's already selected, and then we're going to rotate this into position. You can then test it out, and I want you to take note of these coordinates down here. I like to take a screenshot of this. And now with that done, I'm going to select the right small one and do exactly the same thing. Note that it is also possible to do this in another way by selecting the wing that you're going to be making the new null for, pressing the control keys we did before and then dragging this out. But this time what you can do is you can select the object that you want to go into there, hold down the Shift and C key and type in parent, and you'll see here that you've got this set parent command. If you double click on this and then click on the null, it puts it inside the null. Just take note that it's still needed to freeze all before you go ahead and then rename the null and apply the postmorph. I'm going to copy the name from this one and put the name onto this one. Only it's the right small fold. And now with the coordinates that we had before, we can apply them down here. With my coordinates, it was 71.395. Only difference here is it's in the opposite coordination. So if I apply it like this, it applies it the wrong way. So I need to put minus, and it will put it in the correct way. Same for here. For me, it's 17.801. Same thing again, we want a negative. And now it's posed exactly the same for both sides. Now I want you to go ahead and do exactly the same thing for the left and the right wing. I'm going to just do one more of these, just to show you how I place the left large wing. I'm going to fold it so it's not intersecting. And preferably not going to cross the halfway mark. Take note of these coordinates. I use a program made by TechSmith called Snagit, screen grabbing software, which is really handy. I've been using it for some years now. Then when it comes to doing the right one, I do exactly the same thing for the left one. I just copy these coordinates, but where there is a negative, it'd be a positive, and where there's a positive value, I apply a negative, so that it's the opposite way for the opposite side of the B. So I'm going to go into a time lapse while I just do this. It's possible within Cinema 4D to create your own custom controllers, your own custom sliders and buttons that can do multiple things within your rig. It can be from something very simple to something quite complex, yet it's actually rather simple to set up, despite how complex it may look. To introduce you to this, I'm first of all going to go to a blank scene and then just show you the basics of how we can set this up. This part of the setup is called user data, and user data are empty sliders and buttons that by default doesn't do anything until you assign them to do something. Let's create something really simple here. we'll add a null to the scene. And you'll notice that when you select this null, you can see this tab called User Data. By clicking on it, you can add user data, manage user data that you've already added, and paste user data. We're going to go to Add User Data. When you click on that, a first entrance into the user data will be added to a group called User Data. If I click OK at this point, you'll notice that an extra tab has been created when we select on this null called User Data. And you can also see that we've got this data field in here. Let's go back into the user data and click on Manage User Data. So this is the group and this is the data. Clicking on this data, you'll see here that you've got some parameters. The first thing is the name. The name is the name that's going to be shown in your user data. The next thing is the interface, the type of interface that we're creating. This is what type of button or slider we're going to create. The type that's selected at the moment is the one that you can see in the user data right now. You can also see a demonstration of what it looks like here, and if you go into the example, it shows you an example of what it operates like and what it looks like. A common one to use is a float percentage. A float slider is another common one, and I use this one more often. And you can see here that it's a slider which goes from 0 to 100. You can change where that starts from. As an example, the minimum value could be 21. So you can see here that that's the minimum value. 21 to 100. How you set up this will depend on what it is you're trying to control. It may be the case that something you're trying to control has a minimum setting or percentage starting from 21%. And this is why you've got this option. If you do change this, you've got the option to set a minimum and a maximum of the slider. You can see here that we can set this to -16. If you change this value, it will show you that you've gone beyond that value. You can see here the minimum value is 0, yet we've gone to -16. So even if you've got -16 value in here, it will be this that determines how low it goes. Now, even though the slider is showing 0%, in reality it's still applying a -16% or whatever it is you're going to be controlling at its minimum. We're going to call this move. We're now going to add another data. Let's call this scale. Click OK, and now you've got two sliders which currently do nothing at the moment. Let's go back in there again, and we're going to go to Manage User Data, add another one, call this on, off. This time we're going to create a boolean. The boolean is going to create an on and off button. You can change the type of interface that it uses. Click OK, and now you've got on and off button. Let's add another one. This time we're going to create one called vector. This time we've got 3 fields. This could be related to something that's controlling an X, Y and Z of an object. So it gives you the opportunity to plug in 3 separate fields. We click OK. Let's give it a name. Now I've introduced you to this. Now I'm going to show you in the next stage how we can connect this to actually make something happen. To do this, I'm going to introduce you to a programming language protocol inside Cinema 4D called Xpresso. Xpresso is node based. Don't be concerned because it's not as complicated as it may look. In fact, it's a rather easy way to actually visualize what's going on with things. So I'm going to just introduce you to the Xpresso with some very basics. And then once we get the hang of this, then we're going to go back into our rig of the bee and start to apply this in our actual project. Before we go any further into developing this little mini project with Xpresso, let's just go back and check and rename the null here. We're going to rename this as controller, and I'm going to go back into the user data by clicking on manage user data. And the reason why I've gone in here is because we need to make sure that the function of each of these is set up correctly, because it can have a profound different effect to what you may be expecting when it comes to using these sliders. So first of all, with the move, we need to be aware of exactly what it is we're going to be moving, and whether it's something that's going to be in a percentage or in a measurement term. So in other words, if you're going to be moving something in centimeters, but then you don't want the unit type to be percentage, so you would use this to length unit. You can see here we've got minimum between 0 and 1000 centimeters. In our case, 100 is more than enough. For scale, this may be slightly different. We may want to scale in a percentage. So that is kind of fine for us. We'd leave that as percentage. The X, Y, and Z, this is dependent on what it is we want to actually control of the X, Y, and Z. Is it the position? Is it the scale? Or is it the rotation? Well, we're going to be going for rotation, so we don't need to leave this to real. So instead, we need to have this at degrees. So this is a degrees. At the moment, it's set from 0 to 360. That's absolutely fine. And the default value for the X, the Y and Z, or the head in the pitch and the bank is going to be 0. The on-off switch is what it is. It's going to just turn things on and off. Now that we've got them set up correctly and we click OK, we're going to apply it to a cube, the good old simple cube. In fact, let's pick something a little bit more fun so that we can look at. Let's say we apply it to the figure. So what I want to do first of all is I just want to use the axis center here and just move this up to kind of like where the center point is on this figure. If we can, needs to make it editable. Have the axis center turned on, and I just want to move it up. This is so that it rotates from the center, roughly from the center. That's all we need to do to that. Now we need to be able to set these up so that our sliders are able to control other aspects of this figure. So what exactly can we control of this figure? Well, when we select on this, you can see here that we've got the Basics tab, and in here we've got things like the X-ray. This is an on and off switch, so we can certainly make sure that our controller's on and off switch controls that part of the figure, the X-ray mode on and off. In fact, anything in here, including its coordinates, can also be controlled in that manner. Before we do this, we want to make sure that our coordinates for our object is frozen. That meaning we're going to freeze all, so it's zeroed them out, so we're starting from a baseline of 0. That's an important aspect of this that we always want to do before animating. Now there may be other things that you want to apply, and for this case and purpose what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a morph to this. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to rigging and post morph, and in the post morph we want to choose points. So this is the vertices of our 3D model of the figure here, and we're going to be choosing well, we can just leave it as it is at the moment here. There's other ones in here, as you can see. Relative's absolutely fine for our purpose here, and I'm going to just rename this Grow. Okay, I'm going to go back into our user data. I'm going to add another user data, and you can probably guess what I'm going to add in here. Grow. We're going to have this as a float slider, 0 to 100, and let's just move the order of this a little bit there. So we've got move, scale, grow, X, Y, and Z. Let's make it more clearer what it is we're going to be doing with this. Rotate X, Y, Z, and on and off, and click OK. You can see it's very easy to go back in there and adjust things. Now we've done this, now we're going to edit our pose morph. I'm going to select these polygons, and I'm going to move with the axis, enable axis tool, move this down to the bottom there, roughly where the neck is. That's good. And release that. Go into a pose morph, which is here, and I'm going to scale this up. Okay, and now we should have something working. Now in this particular case, the reason why this is not working is because the head is actually embedded in a hierarchy of objects. So we can go back in here and select that hierarchy and then go back in there, and then it will work. So now it's kind of looking with inside it. You can see now it's working. There we go, grow. Leave that at 0. We will go to animate, and then we won't have to return to that for the moment here. Now there's a couple of ways in which we can apply Xpresso to link the two up, and the first one I'm going to show you is kind of the more simple and easy way, and the second way is a more manual way, but that's kind of easy as well, and it opens up a bit more control for you. So the easy way is to go to the controller and you select what it is that you want to be used. I'm going to use grow, so I'm going to right click on grow. You go to expressions, set driver, and then you go to what you want to drive. So we want to go to our pose morph and drive this slider here, so we're going to right click on that, expressions, set driven, absolute. Now you'll find that this controller has now got control over that. You can see there. Now one thing to note is when you hand over control from the original control, that being this controller no longer works. You can see there. This is because it's given over its priority and its authority, you could say, to the new controller, which is now set in Xpresso. So the Xpresso has been added now in a tag form, and it looks like this. When you click on this, you'll see here its name is kind of given to its function, grow strength. When we double click on this, we will expand the window for Xpresso. Now it's very, very simple what we've got in here. What it's done for us automatically is it's created the controller, which is this, and you can do the same thing by just dragging it in there. It's just literally a replica of that, but it's done it for you automatically. You can see here where it says grow in here. Well, this is one of the parameters that is found within inside this. As you can see here, the user data, we've got all of these. In the same manner, we can actually select that to be showing here also. But before I show you this is more the manual approach, and we will deal with that separately. So back to this more automated approach, we've got the controller, and it's automatically chosen the grow slider. We've then got a range mapper, and the range mapper is an interpreter node that interpretates one data to another. It can interpretate maybe percentages to degrees. So it's very, very clever in the way it works, and it's a very, very common one that you're going to be using a lot. Not only can you tell it to convert one unit of measure to another, you can also create limits as to how much percentage is driving the actual degrees of rotation, for example. So this range mapper will set the range up, hence its name. So in this particular case, you can see here that when we click on the range mapper, it's showing us the data type as being real, and the percentage and the input range is percentage and the output range is percentage. That's absolutely correct and accurate. We know that the slider for a controller is set up to be percentage, you can see there, and that our postmorph is also set up as percentage. So the range mapper has automatically got this right so that it works. When we select individually or select them both, and you can select them both there with the shift key, you can see here the input lower and input upper. The input lower and upper is a reference to the single slider, which is for the input. That being on the controller, let's select this now, we've got this grow. So the input lower is the minimum amount, as you can see is 0, and the input upper is the maximum amount, which is for this 100%. And that's what this represents here. The input lower and the input upper is the minimum and maximum range of our slider. The output will be the postmorph in this particular case, so the minimum for the postmorph strength is 0 and the maximum for postmorph strength is 100. Now you can alter these figures so that you don't require the same amount of slider movement to have the effect of 100%. So this is something that you can play with on your own, just to have a little play with this and see what this does. But that's really the basics there of how this is set up. Now the more manual approach to this, that's just delete this. The manual approach is you would first create that Xpresso. So I'm going to create the Xpresso on the actual controller itself, but you can actually create it on the figure if you wanted to. I'm going to create it on the controller. Right click, programming tags, and then Xpresso. It opens up a blank state here, and then we just need to set things up. So we want the controller and we want the postmorph. We drag and drop that in there, and we've got both of them in there. Now we need a range mapper to kind of be between the two. So what we do is we go to the little tiny icon which shows to search, and we just start to type in range, and it will certainly come up very quickly, and there it is. Drag and drop that in there. We know from the previous automated way that it's real, and we've got percentage to percentage. Very simple. The input lower are the ones that we need to change, if at all. When you first see this, you'll see an extra input there which is 0, and an extra output sometimes there which is 0. Ignore this because this will disappear once we've got it connected up. The ones we have to look at is the input lower and the input upper, these two here. The input lower and the output upper. That first one there will disappear. Sometimes you can be deceived to thinking that you need to change something in here, but you actually don't. And then that's all there is to it. We just need to now say what it is we want to control from the driver's end to the driven end. Well, we know that we want to control the, we'll use the slider for grow. So to add an output, which is on the pink little tiny square here, we click on that, and then we're looking to user data, and you can see here there's grow, and then we can connect that by just clicking in this little tiny node output little circle, and then as you drag it over to the input it turns green, which means kind of says go, it's okay and ready to connect. You let go and you've got this wire that connects it from the output of the controller to the input of the range mapper. Now for the postmorph, we now need to select an input. Now the input is done by clicking on the little blue square, and again we can see what it is that we can choose for our input. And there's lots of things that we can choose, but we want the tag properties. Now the tag properties, for your information, is there's the tag for the postmorph, and there's the tag itself. Okay, so we've got this postmorph and then the tag. So when we click on the input, this is why we see tag properties, because it is actually the properties of the tag. Now we can select on the particular one that we want, and it's grow strength. Do not be confusing this with strength. Okay, this strength is going to be applying to all of your pose morphs. This one here is in particular for this pose morph. So we can select this and then it will appear there. You can see there. To delete anything inside there, we can just rescale this so we can see it. We just right click and click on delete port. Another way of bringing this into here rather than clicking on here, and somewhat a quicker way, well, sometimes it can be quicker, is we click on this pose morph and you can see here we've got grow. If you were to drag this and then hover over, you can see onto the input area and let go, it adds it in there for us, and you can just drag and drop loads of parameters in there. Now we're going to connect our output to the input, and that's basically doing it the manual way. We can now close this, and in either case, whenever we select this controller and select the grow, it's going to grow, which is great. Now let's do the same thing for the move. We're going to be moving in centimeters, so we're going to do another automated way of doing it, and then for the scale we're going to do it manually, so you get the idea of how we can do both. So the automated way is to right click, expressions, set driver. We're going to go to what we want to drive, so we want to drive the move of the character. Go to the character or the figure, coordinates, and then we've got this position. So what do we want to control? We want to control maybe the Y position, so I'm going to right click on there, expressions, set driven absolute. You can see here when we do this kind of like automated way, it creates a brand new one for us, and this is fine. This is fine and it's okay way of doing it, but just keep in mind that each time you do this, it's going to create a brand new Xpresso for us. And there may be times we just want to keep everything in one Xpresso. Now in this particular case, I can actually open this, select all of it by dragging around it, and I can control an X to cut it away, open up the previous Xpresso, click in here and control and V to paste it. And it's going to work exactly the same as if it was separately. The only difference here is that if you wanted to have some Xpresso commands working in a certain priority, one before the other, then that's kind of like a time when you would actually have them separately. So from the top, anything in that Xpresso is going to be executed first, and then anything underneath that in that hierarchical structure will be executed secondly, and down it goes. And there will be times where you may want that to happen, but in this particular case I want it to all happen at the same time in here. That's fine. And now I can delete this other Xpresso, which is now empty. Now we go to our controller, and our controller, you can see move, and then when you click on this you can see we've got move, and it is actually moving, believe it or not. It's just that we've got it in a component mode at the moment there, so we need to go into the model mode, and again it is moving. It's just because we've got this set up to control the figures move here in the position. Not sure why it's not moving. And then when we select this controller and we click on this move, you'll see here that our character is moving up and down. Now let's do another one. We'll go back into here, and this time we're going to be using exactly the same controller as before, so we don't need to drag and drop it in there. We can just hold the control key, drag down, and it makes a duplicate of this. This time we don't want to do the move, we're going to do a scale. So to do the scale we don't need to remove it, but I'm going to remove it. In the controller you can see here we've got scale, okay, in a percentage, and then we're going to drag and drop that to the input. we're going to use a range mapper. Again, I'm going to hold down the control key to duplicate that. And what are we dealing with this time? We should be dealing with percentage still. So there's our scale. This is actually neither. These are real values scale. So we will deal with 0 to 100 in this particular case. Let's put that back to there. And range mapper 0 to 100. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. Let's drag this into the input. And then again the figure. We're going to be affecting the figure. We don't need its position in there anymore. We're going to delete that port. But what we do want in there is to scale it. Now in the coordinates we can go to our scale. And notice you've got scale and you've got X, Y and Z. So we can scale on the individual X, Y and Z, or we can scale globally on all of them at the same time. So we're going to select globally, this one here. And by the way, when I say globally, it's not the same as global position and rotation. So excuse my terms with this. This is actually different. It behaves differently when an object's inside another object for its hierarchy. So this would be something that you want to look up in the user guide. But uniformly is what really I should have said. It's scale uniformly is what I've chosen there, just to make that clear. And then we're going to click the output to the input. Now, where's it gone, you may ask? Well, 0 to 100 is our input fields. And originally, this model was at 1. So we'll change this to 1. Okay, 1 is the initial scale that it was in. And let's choose the book. Zero, that should be 1. You've got to remember that what we're looking at here is the input being the slider and the output being the actual object itself in this particular case. So that's why it starts from 1. When we look at the figure, you can see here the scale's default value is 1, which is why I went to the range mapper and said, right, we need to start from 1 here. So that's good. Now when we go to our controller, we click on scale, we can now uniformly scale it up and down. Grow may be similar to scale. If we renamed it something different like grow head, would make more sense. But you can see here that this is using our post morph. And now we're going to work with the last one, which is vector type. Vector is when it's got 3 values in there, so at the minimum. And this is going to be able to allow you to have control over 3 values from 1 connection. So that's set that one up. So again, we're going to select all 3 of these, drag down, and then we're going to work on this one. So we're going to change this port, and this one's going to be for rotation. So we're going to go to a coordinates, rotation, and we're just going to select rotation rather than individual ones. This is our rotation. Now normally this would act as a uniform rotation, but because we got a vector type controller, it's going to split it up for us into the X, Y and Z, as you'll see in a minute. So for the range mapper, rather than it being real, we're actually dealing with a vector now. And instantly you're going to see that it's changed the way it looks, and that's good. So what we want to do is we want to set it up, and I believe it's already set up for our scale. It is. That's brilliant. We want to set it up for a rotation low. So we're going to just select rotation. Let's plug this into there and delete our port. Connect this up. Now we can say what we want to happen. So our slider, the minimum is going to be 0, and that's to say we're going to say allow up to 180 degrees. We can allow up to 360. In fact, let's just do it. 360. You click on the tab key, it will go to the next field. 360, 360. Okay, and the output is obviously our figure. And we're going to allow that to rotate 360. So 360, 360. That tab key is just shifting along. Okay. The input range and the output range, well, it's not 0 to 100. We are dealing with degrees now. So providing we've got our controller set up accurately, you can see here we have its degrees. Then when we go to our range mapper, we can also set the same as the input range as dealing with degrees. Obviously, if our controller was set in percentage, you would select and set that as percentage, but we've matched them up as they should be. And now what will happen, we'll just close this down, we go to our controller. We've got 3 independent controls, and with these controls we're going to be able to rotate 360 degrees on each of them. So make sure everything's okay. The rotation, rotate. Okay, rotate XYZ was the controller. I needed to go to user data. There it is. I selected the wrong one there. So my mistake there. So rotate X, Y, and Z. Not these ones here. These are just generic ones. We want the actual slider. So let's put the slider in there. Otherwise it won't work. The slider is now connected up to do its job. Now when we go to the controller, we're going to do this. You can see here we've got 360 degrees on all these axes. There you go. Last but not least, let's make this one really quick. We're going to just move these out of the way for the moment here, and just for repetition, let's get these out of the way so we can see what we're doing. Repetition is the key to understanding and remembering. Controller input, this time we're going to go to user data, we're going to go on and off. We're going to select our figure. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be just a figure. It could be something that's like inside the post morph even. And we're going to select our figure and see what we got. On and off switch. So we go for the X-ray. Okay. And we'll chuck a range mapper in there. This time it's going to be a real value, and it's going to be a simple 0 to 1. This is basically a switch. 0 is off, 1 is on, and that's it. We'll connect these up, and we're done. If you want to reverse the value, there will be times where you have the value reversed, where you've got one controller which has an on and off switch, but you wish to turn one thing off while you turn one thing on. All you have to do is just have another range mapper for the other object and switch these values. So this one, the output lower will be 1, and the output higher will be 0. You just reverse them around and it will have the opposite effect. If you wanted to have one controller on and off button to control multiple objects but to have different effects. So now that we've done that, we've got all of our controllers set up. We can now turn on the X-ray. It should be turning on right now. Let's just check. Figure, controller, 0 to 1, 0 to 1. Yeah, that should be working right now. X-ray for figure, controller on and off. Yep, that should be working now. And you can tell that it's being controlled by something else, because now we can turn it on and off. And to show you that it's actually gone on and off, we're gonna just move that out there like that. We go to a controller. You can see here that the X-ray is actually turning on and off. Even though you may not be seeing it or much happening in the viewport, it's actually working, as you can see. Now what we can do is we can now add this to HUD. What this means is we can go to our user data, we can select all of these with the control key, right click, and then click on add to HUD. And then we can move this with the control key anywhere in our UI, and we can right click and we can have it to be shown only when we've selected that controller in this particular case, or always. I'm going to choose always, and now we can move it in the Y, we can rotate it uniformly, we can grow the head, and we can rotate it, the heading, the pitch and the bank. We can turn on and off the X-ray mode from this. Now what you can do from this is you can now animate it. These little tiny diamonds indicate keys that can be set. So for instance, I can set a key for the move, the scale, the grow. In fact, you can set a key for all of these, and then we can move on to say, I don't know, frame 20, and that's just rotate this guy 360 degrees. We click on there and we set another key, and you can see here now it's doing its job. That's pretty nifty. And of course you can do this with any of these parameters. Give it a 90 degrees, and now it's doing both simultaneously. Let's make his head grow. So I'm going to click on the grow one, key there, move on to frame 30, and then I'm going to grow it and key it there. 40, we take the grow back down again. Let's play it back. And there you go. Moving back into our B scene, I'm going to go to the body controller and I'm going to create a new controller within there. I'm going to hold down the shift key, I'm going to go to here, I'm going to choose a cogwheel. This cogwheel is going to be made editable once I've made it in the right axis. You see, like that, it's going to be massive at the moment here. I'm just going to make it editable, and then I'm going to scale it right down. And then in turn I'm going to move it up. This cogwheel is going to be there so that we can click on it any time, and we're going to add our user data to this cogwheel so we can access all the sliders and buttons and data of our entire rig. With this selected, we're going to go to user data and manage user data. Now we don't want this user data to be showing in there as user data. Instead we want a different name. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new group. Drag this outside the group, and then we're going to delete this. We're now going to select this and then go to user data and click on manage user data. We're going to add a brand new group and drag this group outside the default group so we don't see this default group anymore. This is the one that's going to hold all the data. We're going to create one called flap on and off. This is for the wings to flap. So that's create, add data. Before we do this, I'm just going to call this wings for the group. And then within wings I'm going to click on add data, and this is going to be called flap on/off. This is going to be a float slider. We're going to create another one. I'm going to call this one speed. And this one's going to be controlling the speed of the wings, how quick they flap. And again, we're going to choose this float slider. And even though we're calling them speed and flap, these may not be the names of the actual data we're going to be controlling. This is one of the advantages of creating our own user sliders, is we can call them whatever we want, so it makes sense to the animator. Next one we're going to choose is amplitude. And amplitude needs to be set up as a vector and for degrees. Wing fold. Float slider. And dynamic wings. And this one's going to be a on and off button, I believe. So we're going to go to a boolean and then we're going to click OK. Now, rather than user data showing here, now it's showing wings. We've got these controllers here. Now, as I mentioned, these controllers are not really going to do anything just yet, but whenever we click on this cogwheel now, we're going to see these controllers there. And that is what we want. We want to be able to add as many controllers as possible to this one cogwheel here, this one controller, so that we're going to be able to have access to all of these different things of our rig. So I've just renamed our cog to control data. We're going to concentrate on the flap on and off. Okay, that's what we're going to be controlling. And being that it's flap on and off, it looks like it really should be a button rather than a slider. So we can change that. Go to user data, manage user data. Flap on and off, we just change that to a completely different type. You notice here that sometimes you try to change it and it's not going to be there. So in this particular case, I'm not quite sure why it locks me off, but it's not a problem. We go to wings, we paste that in, flap on and off, and we change it to a boolean. And this one here, which is wrong, we delete. Click OK. And that's more like it. A flap on and off. So that's expand one of the wings. In fact, that's expand all of the wings, because they're going to have something in common here. And that is they're all going to have a vibrator tag on them. If you haven't got the vibrator tag on them, and this is the controller that we want it on, not the top null, you just select that, hold down the Shift and C key, type in vibrate and double click, and it will add that tag to there. And we want that tag to be added to the controllers, these ones here, the spline controllers. Okay, now let's go to our control data for the moment here. This Xpresso that you see here is one that I created earlier, so I'm deleting that. You won't see that there. We're going to select that control data, and in the wings we're going to right click on and off, expressions, set driver. Now we're going to select all our 4 wings with the control key, and then we're going to right click on enable rotation, expressions, set driven absolute. And now you'll see that it's added and Xpresso for each of them. But essentially these expressions are actually doing all the same thing. So it's handy for us to be able to have them in all the same location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the first one here. And you can see here that it's quite simply that we've just got this left ring enable rotation. Then we have the small one and the large one, etc. and so forth. We don't even need to copy and paste each of them into there because it's so simple the way that it's set up. If you wanted to, you can go into these other ones here and just grab these, cut them away and go back into here and paste it. You can do that if you want, or you can select the tag. We're on the third one here, so we can select the tag. This is the vibration tag, and we've got tag properties, enable rotation, same thing. And the fourth one here, I'm just going to double click and cut it and put it into the first one. We don't need these ones anymore. It's all going to be done in this one. All we have to do is just connect this on and off switch to all of them. So it will enable the rotation for all of them simultaneously, and we've got it all in one place. That's what we're going to do from now on. Whenever we do something to do with all of them, we're going to just get that data and just put it into that one single one. That's good. Now we don't have to leave it actually on the object. We can leave it as on a object which is just further up. So I'm going to put it actually on the data controller here, and it's still going to work absolutely fine. I'm going to show you that it works fine. I'm going to select the vibration tag. We're going to lock it, and we're going to select our controller. In fact, that's unlocked that. We'll go to our controller first, and I'm just going to create a HUD for this. So I'm going to control click all of these, right click, and then add to HUD option. The control key, I'm going to drag it up to here so I can get access to it. I'm going to right click, show always. That way I don't have to keep on clicking on this anymore. It's all going to be up here for us. Now we do what we're going to do. We're going to select the vibrate controller, all four of them, and see that enable rotation. When we click on the flap on and off, you can see here that it's working. We'll leave it on for the moment while we've got these all selected. And what I want you to do is I want you to understand that this amplitude is to do with the direction in which it's rotating, the heading, the pitch and the bank. So you need to adjust these accordingly for your liking. So in my particular case, if I select them individually, you can see what I've got in there. Now what you'll notice is you can see here these two here, and we will look into this a little bit later on. I'm just sort of giving you a heads up in advance. You notice that these two here, let's just select these are right wings, and we notice here that it says the amplitude 0, 32 degrees, 22 degrees. Now we select the left wings, and you notice that it says minus 22. And this is because it's flipped the other way. Obviously the wing on the right is different to the wing on the left. So I'm going to show you how we set up the data for the range mappers to do this for us. But we haven't got to that point yet. So I'm just giving you a heads up that if you go ahead by yourself and try to do this, you may get your wings flipping all the wrong way. So I urge you to wait until we get to that point. Just wanted to make you know that. Now we're going to select on that cogwheel again. We're going to select the speed. If they're all still highlighted orange, make sure that you only select one of them, which is speed. We're going to right click, expression, set driver. Then we're going to select all of our vibrate tags. And then we're going to right click on frequency. and go to expressions, set driven absolute. And this is for our speed controller. We're going to refine everything afterwards, after we've assigned it all. We just click on the first one there. You can see how it's made this up. And again, we don't need to have them all separate in there. So I'm going to select everything in here. I'm going to cut it away. I'm going to go into this controller and paste it in. And then I'm going to go to delete them as I go, so I know what it is I'm working on. We only need that part of it. We cut that out. Put that in there. And then the last one. Delete what we don't need. Now up to this point I've been showing you the way of selecting the driver and then selecting the driven and having this Xpresso being created kind of automatically. But from this point onwards we're going to do things a little bit more manually. Now you should have the kind of gist of how it works. So with this range mapper we're going to plug the same output slider into all of the 4 wings so that the speed, which is called frequency on the vibrate tag, is going to be adjustable. I'm going to just select all of these just to show you that it is working as it should be. So we will adjust our speed. Our amplitude we're going to be working with in a minute. We're now going to hook up our wing fold. This time we're going to do it more than the manual approach. So for the wing fold we know that the control data, as always, is where the sliders are coming from. So we're going to select this. We've already got one already. Hold down the control key and just drag down and it makes a copy. We don't need speed in there. We're going to right click that and delete the port. If we were to select the control data, we can drag and drop this fold wings into the pink output, and then we're going to go to our pose morph tags, all of them, all 4 of them. We just drag and drop our pose morphs into there. Okay, there they all are. Let's just distribute them out a little bit. We're going to right click, tag properties. See that? It's specific to that. We're going to create a new range mapper. Type it in if it's not already there. The range mapper is going to be real. Let's tell them to percentage. Okay. Let's plug this into there and plug that into all of these. And by doing that, it's going to fold all of the wings simultaneously. You can see now we've got a basic setup the way it should look. Input 0, input lower 0, input upper 100. And remember that this is all to do with the slider. It's minimal and maximum, and this is to do with what it's outputting to, which is the pose morph, the minimum and the maximum of the slider, and it's that simple. So now let's select this again, and you can see here we've now connected up the flap on and off, the speed, the amplitude, the wing fold. The only thing we haven't connected up yet is the dynamics, so we will do that now. We turn that off and we will go to our Xpresso, open it up. We're going to find the wings. We're going to use our filter there, type in wing, and what we're looking for is the IK. See that? Control click on all 4 wings, and then in dynamics, this is where we're going to control that. So we're going to drag and drop the IK tag into there. I'm just using the mouse wheel to zoom out. We'll select all of these. We'll spread them out. And what we're going to be controlling, I believe, let's just select one of these, let's have a look. Enable. So that's what we're going to be controlling. So dynamics, enable. Good. We're going to copy this range mapper or just drag a brand new one in, and we're still going to use the same data, the control data. So we'll select this one, control, drag to create a copy. We're going to delete that port and add the brand new ports that we need. Under wings, we've got dynamic wings, and the range mapper is going to be a 0-1. It's going to be on and off switch. That's all it's going to be, a 0 to 1. We connect these up. Like that, and that's just select our, doesn't matter, we just select one of them. When we click on dynamic wings, you can see that this button now is actually turning it on and off. Now as a preference, you can, if you want to, use the settings that I've got here to get similar results and then tweak them. I found that these are kind of ideal for the dynamics, but before you do that, you're going to need to want to have the wings flapping so that you can then judge exactly where you want these dynamics to be like. So that's why we've done it like this. So we can go in there and then tweak it afterwards. So the last one that we're going to add is the amplitude of the wings flapping. And we're going to do exactly what we've been doing so far. We've got the rest of them set up. Let's just go up here. Again, we're going to just drag our control data into here. Wings, amplitude. We're going to have a range mapper as you would expect. And then we're going to add the amplitude of these in there. Let's drag and drop all of these 3 tags in there. This is the vibrate tag. amplitude, we want the rotation amplitude. And we don't want them individually, but we just want this one here. Okay. Do exactly the same thing for these. Now we're going to arrange them into left wings and right wings. So I'm going to put the left wings at the bottom there and the right wings at the top. You can do it in any order that you want, but I'd suggest you do it in this order just to follow along. And what we're going to be setting up here is the difference between the way that the wings are flapping on the left to the right. The way the range mapper is going to work is it's going to have to work in a slightly different way, in reverse, from one direction of one set of wings, the left to the right. And that's why we need to do it this way. That's why it's important. So we're going to the node and then degrees for the output range. In the parameters, oh, and one thing I forgot to do, where it says real, that needs to be vector. So this is what we should see. Now it's going to change a little bit once we start to plug things in. But in the input lower, it's going to be 0. And the maximum is going to be 360 degrees. Okay. That's connect the amplitude to there. It's going to be for the right side. We'll plug that in there. And then we're going to hold down the control key to duplicate this range mapper, and we're going to connect this we're going to make some changes. Now there is a node called negate, and I've just showed you up here. You type in negate, and this does something very similar. It will reverse the values to the opposite way, but in this particular case the heading and the bank have a different reverse setting of parameters, but the pitch remains the same. So this is why we are not going to use the negate, because it will reverse the heading, the bank and the pitch, and we only need 2 of them reversed. So I'll just show you in here how to do this. We're going to select that range mapper, and it should be a vector type with degrees. The parameter and the bank should be a minus. So we've got minus 360, and in here we just got 360. This one in the middle there will represent the pitch, and the pitch is the only one that doesn't need to be reversed in this. I have reverse values for the opposite side of the wing. Now that we've done that, we can now press play. We'll first do the heading. Fine. We do the bank. Fine. And then we do the pitch. And that's that. Now this HUD is going to be out of date now, so we're going to right click and remove the HUD. We're going to go back to our controller, and I'm going to show you a few kind of things that you can put in here to get you started straight away that I know seem to work. So we start at say 13%, and we do like 32 on there and 22 on there. So it's not just flapping up and down, because bees' wings actually don't flap up and down, they actually flap backwards and forwards. That's how they're able to get that lift. And a wing fold, we know obviously works fine, and that'd be kind of a good place to start off. So we can go and select all of these again now, right click, add to HUD, move the HUD up there, right click, and then show always. Now we don't ever have to click on that again now unless we want to kind of change anything. So all we have to do is just click on play. We dial that speed down a little bit. We've got the wings flapping the way they should be. We've got the axis in which it's flapping. You can see here the X, Y and the Z. We can still have control over the folding even while it's flapping. And we can turn on dynamics. Let's get a slower speed. There we go. If you like my content and have learned something from it, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm not monetizing my content, it's for free, made for you in my own free time. So please give me some support back by hitting that thumbs up and subscribing. The next part of this video tutorial will be up very soon, and we will continue where we left off. So stay tuned.